What a difference a week makes for Texas A&M football. Coming off of last week, Texas A&M had lost two straight games against Arkansas and Mississippi State and entered Saturday night as 16-point underdogs against top-ranked Alabama, who was coming into College Station undefeated so far this year and rolling. But it's Texas A&M who walks away with a 41-38 victory over Alabama. Just a huge, huge win for Jimbo Fisher and his program, given the way the past few weeks had gone. The recruiting angle with how many top prospects were in town tonight. We'll get to all of that. We'll get to the performance from Zach Calzada, what this win means going forward. Again, on the Texas A&M and Alabama postgame show on the Voice of College Football. Just a huge, huge win and a huge credit to the Texas A&M players and coaching staff for the way they've bounced back. And there has been a lot of criticism the past few weeks, a lot, from all fronts, from play calling to the play of Zach Calzada to play of the veterans to the play of the offensive line. And the team responded in a big way when I don't think very much was expected at all from them tonight. Again, Texas A&M entered the night 16-point underdogs, and you could understand why, given the way that they had played the past few weeks. But Texas A&M looked nothing like the team that it took the field against Arkansas and Mississippi State, and you could see it very early on. The Aggies drove right down got the ball first, and drove right down to take a 3-0 lead with a 7-play, 54-yard drive. And even though they were held to a field goal on that possession, you could just see they felt comfortable and had an early rhythm offensively. Alabama comes right back with a 10-play, 65-yard drive to take a 7-3 lead, and then A&M comes right back with Zach Calzada's arm, actually. And he had no doubt had his struggles, but he was fantastic tonight. He leads A&M on a 3-play, 75-yard drive to take a 10-7 lead. A&M jumps out to a 17-7 lead later in the first quarter, and from there, they just played with a ton of confidence the rest of the way, and it wasn't easy. You knew Alabama was going to make a run at some point, and sure enough, they did in the second half. Pulled back within 31-30 early in the fourth quarter, and then took a 38-31 lead with a 9-play, 82-yard drive. And then it was really gut check time for the A&M offense. It kind of felt like, with the way they had been struggling, got virtually nothing going in the second half. Had 4 drives after halftime that resulted in a punt, 3 plays and a punt, 4 plays and a punt, 3 plays. They ran 13 plays over the first quarter and a half in the second half. And Alabama really took control. But with their backs against the wall again, they respond with a 6-play, 65-yard drive and a beautiful touchdown pass from Zach Calzada to Anais Smith to tie the game at 38. And then he obviously departed with the knee injury briefly, was checked out in the tent after getting rolled up on, and the A&M defense comes right back with another stop. And I will tell you, there was a very good point on the Gig'em 247 message board where I work and write about how this game felt a little reminiscent to the Florida game last year, where the A&M defense got a stop, gave it right back to the Texas A&M offense, who drove down for another field. And once again, it was Seth Small who knocked home a 28-yard field goal to give A&M a 41-38 victory. Was the exact same score that they finished with last year against Florida. Just a huge, huge win. And these two wins in many ways felt quite similar. We'll get to that for sure. But I think we've got to start with the play of Zach Calzada. He deserves a lot of credit, and it had taken a lot of criticism. And you could tell in the post game that Jimbo Fisher was pretty emotional, talking about the performance of his quarterback. He had really struggled, and he had struggled with pressure. And there were times tonight when he had to weather a storm. But my goodness, he finishes 21 of 31 for 285 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception. The interception, I thought the way he bounced back from the interception, though, was notable. and just the way that he was able to weather that Alabama storm in the second half. He had his moments when he looked to be getting a little edgy, but was able to come up big with another late drive to help A&M get the win. And there's no telling what this can do for him going forward. It was reported before the game by CBS that Haynes King would likely miss the rest of the season. That's a big blow for Texas A&M, and now it'll be Zach Calzada's show for at least the foreseeable future, and it's going to be fascinating to see what kind of confidence boost this gives him going forward. Texas A&M heads on the road now after playing games at home against Mississippi State and Alabama these past 2 weeks. They'll head on the road to face Missouri in a game that A&M will likely be favored in now, coming off of this week. The A&M should be ranked again. And then you come home and face South Carolina. So suddenly, if you're Texas A&M, a week ago you were staring at 3-3, and kind of where was the season going to go with Alabama coming in, and you could be heading into that Missouri game off of 3 straight losses. There were so many questions this week, and that's why in a way I say this is similar to the Florida game last year, because it was some of the same questions that popped up in both of these games. There was a lot of talk about the quarterback position, and would other guys start to get snaps, and would a guy like Blake Boast get snaps? We saw him warming up late when Zach Calzada went into the tent. Didn't end up seeing him, but there were a lot of questions about where A&M would go at the quarterback position. Should Zach Calzada struggle again? He had struggled at times this year, and he really rose to the occasion. And there were also struggles entering the week about Jimbo Fisher's play calling, and where was Jimbo Fisher's play calling, and would he possibly consider in the future handing over play calling duties, and what was the system for calling plays? There were just a lot of questions, similar to what A&M went through last year after the Alabama game, turned around and beat Florida, and used that as a springboard for the rest of the season. It's going to be fascinating to see. Does A&M probably have the same shot as they maybe had last year to make a run to the college football playoffs? Probably not. If they were to use this as the same sort of springboard, but nonetheless, at 4-2 now, the season looks a little bit different, quite a bit different for Texas A&M, and they have some momentum to work off of, and they still have a lot that they can accomplish ahead of them with a bit of a softer schedule coming up over the next 3 weeks to gain some momentum offensively. And they've got to build off this the same way they did last season. But it's just a huge night. A&M had an absolutely huge list of recruits in town as well. So from this perspective, to beat Alabama at home in front of that group of recruits, and given what Jimbo Fisher is able to do from the recruiting perspective, even when the team was struggling, it's going to be a huge thing to watch going forward. Guys like Walter Nolan was in town, Bear Alexander. They had Deion Bowie, who was a guy to keep an eye on. He was at Georgia recently, and A&M's fighting to hold on to him as a Texas A&M commit. So just a huge moment for Texas A&M, and a win they badly needed. Moving forward, this does kind of change the outlook for Texas A&M. It changes the way you look at the season now, given some of the struggles that other programs around the SEC had been having. The schedule is still very tough moving forward, but again, Missouri and South Carolina coming up. Those look like 2 opportunities for Texas A&M. And then you come out of the bye, and they'll have Auburn on November 6th at Ole Miss and LSU. But to get this win in this fashion was huge. And one of the big stories from the game, I know from a scoring perspective, giving up 38 points might seem like the defense didn't play well, but I think the defense really answered the bell tonight and did exactly what they needed to do. This was always going to be a high scoring game, just given what Alabama was able to do. But the pressure that A&M was able to get on Alabama, especially early in the game, sacked Bryce Young 5 times, had 2 turnovers. He was under pressure quite a bit more, forced throwaways, forced him to be uncomfortable. There were throws that he's made the past couple of weeks that were either high or uh, fell incomplete, and he just didn't look comfortable. A&M never allowed him to get comfortable. Big big credit. A lot of credit goes to a guy like Tyree Johnson, who had 2 sacks tonight. He had 2 tackles for a loss. Thought he was fantastic. Michael Clemens. Those are 2 guys that A&M has been pushing to get more from. Michael Clemens is a guy that came back to for a game like this, for a moment like this, to help A&M, beat a team like Alabama and achieve high things. And so for him to have 3 tackles for a loss tonight was huge. Aaron Hansford had 9 tackles, and Damani Richardson comes up with a big interception. At the time, I know it's early in the game. I know it's early in the first half, but to hold Alabama out of the end zone there and keep it at a 17-7 game was just huge from a momentum standpoint. And that's a play that you just don't see Alabama make very often. And it was a huge turn in the game. Just at least in the first half, and those points came back to be huge down the line. And Alabama was usually so good in the red zone, especially the way they were moving the ball in the second half. It was going to be a play. You never know when the play is going to come. It could have come in the first or second quarter, and that one turned out to be huge. And I thought A&M, the job that they did in the second half to at least hold Alabama to a couple field goals was huge as well, because that was at a time when the offense wasn't able to get much going, and the A&M defense was just on the field a ton. I mean, after halftime, you saw Alabama go on a 10 play drive, on a 10 play drive, 6 play drive, 9 play drive, 13 play drive, and then another 9 play drive, all resulting in scores. And by that point, the A&M defense had held them to field goals on 9 and 13 play drives, that had moved deep into A&M territory. Both had moved inside the A&M 10-yard line, and to hold A&M to 6 points there at least allowed a chance for the A&M offense to get going, and they got going just in time, made enough plays late, to end up with a win, and then to force a 3-and-out, give the ball back to A&M with a chance late. It kind of felt like a game when A&M scored to tie the game at 38. It felt like that was likely a game that could be heading for overtime, but for A&M's defense to force a quick turnover and get the ball back to Zach Calzada and the offense, who moved the ball right down the field again, drew a penalty on a pass interference, and were able to do just enough to pick up the victory. Got to talk about the performance of Devon Achane too. Isaiah Spiller was obviously banged up tonight, and it was tough sledding against this Alabama defensive line. But Devon Achane made his impact felt in all 3 areas. He finishes with seven rushing attempts for 34 yards, had 3 catches for 45 yards, and then the huge kick return of 96 yards, that came at a time when Alabama had just scored, and A&M goes right back up 31-17 early in the third quarter. It came off a punt block, and that's a play that could have really swung momentum in Alabama's favor, but A&M just had an answer every single time, and that's something that Jimbo Fisher's talked a lot about in the past 2 years, about what's allowed A&M to have success, and we hadn't seen it to this point this year, but it's the offense picking up the defense, it's the defense picking up the offense, it's special teams picking up, after a mistake, and so to come right back and erase that mistake with a kickoff return to go back up 2 scores early in the third quarter was a huge moment in the game. The A&M special teams struggle a little bit tonight. I think there's no question about that. Nick Constantino's been so good so far this year. Had a couple tough punts, had the punt blocked, and so you had a kickoff out of bounds, and so the special teams, which has been a big strength for A&M so far this year, was uncharacteristically problematic tonight, and set Alabama up in great field position on a couple of occasions. But this was an example, and Jimbo Fisher's talked about it quite a bit, of complementary football. And I don't think anybody saw this coming tonight against a team like Alabama, but at certain points, your offense needs to pick up your defense, just like the defense picked up the offense in Colorado when A&M was held to just 3 points and was able to come out with that win. Tonight, it was the offense's turn to pick up the defense, and that's something. No matter when things haven't gone well, Jimbo Fisher's always talked about that this team continues to doesn't fracture it. They continue to hold together, and that's something that's really telling of the just the culture that A&M's built, and something they're certainly going to be able to sell. Even this week, just checking on the pulse of the program, there was never really doubt about the direction the program was heading. Talking to a couple of people, there was the message was that A&M will get it fixed and A&M will get it turned around. They didn't hide from the struggles that they were going through. But this win, this is a game for going back to early in the summer, and then we have to talk about this is when Jimbo Fisher kind of talked about that famous quote about we're going to beat Nick Saban while he's there, using less colorful words than he did at the time. But this has been a game that you got to give him credit. He came in and A&M backed him up, and he embraced the challenge of playing Alabama, of trying to beat them, of meeting that task. And A&M does it with a backup quarterback who grew up tonight, an offensive line that came together and, for the most part, protected Zach Calzada pretty well. If you look at Alabama, a team that can generate a lot of pressure, no sacks tonight, no sacks and 4 tackles for a loss. Were there plays they could have made in the running game? Sure, A&M didn't get a ton of push in the running game, but that's a tough defensive line to go against. But if you had told me that Texas A&M was going to not give up any sacks tonight against Alabama, I would have told you were probably crazy. And so for that to happen was just a huge tip of the cap to Josh Henson and the job he did this week, because that's a group that has struggled. It's been as a result of injuries at times, lack of cohesiveness. You could name the reasons, and even tonight that they lose Jameer Johnson for a point, and Kenyon Green has to step out to left tackle. And I thought he played really, really well tonight, handling and a couple tough challenges, and that defensive line and just what they're able to do. It was just super impressive with the job that the A&M offensive line did. And moving forward again, this really gives a huge boost to A&M moving forward at a time when things look to be heading the other direction. I mean, my goodness, all week you kind of felt like this might be a night with a ton of recruits in town and the momentum that they've built on the recruiting trail. And you thought, boy, where are things going to go tonight if they lose this game, and what's the recruiting class going to look like going forward? And now you look at it in the other direction, because there was one of the questions moving into tonight was just how would A&M be able to move the ball? And I think the way they struggled in the second half was something I think many thought would happen a lot sooner. But we talked all throughout my time talking with Mark about A&M staying ahead of the chains and being able to stay in third and manageable situations. And tonight they were able to do that for the most part. I mean, A&M struggled on third and longs. Obviously, they were 0 for 3 on third down and longs of 9+ yards. But average third down to distance to go was 7.3, and they still struggled at times on third downs, but they kept themselves in good situations. They never felt like a time until late when Zach Calzada really, was put in a lot of bad situations. There was not a lot of, other than the mistake he made on the throw where Anaya Smith was moving upfield. He protected the ball a lot better than I thought he was going to. I thought he was going to struggle with just the schemes that Alabama was going to throw at him. I thought Alabama would be able to get a lot more pressure on him. They just weren't able to. And again, that a lot of that credit goes to the defensive line, to the offensive line for A&M, and just what they were able to do, protecting him, giving him time to make some of those throws. And then we saw We saw the A&M offense step forward, and Zach Calzada finds 7 different receivers tonight. Manias Smith, he had been quiet the past couple of weeks. He had 6 catches for 85 yards and 2 touchdowns. And then even Isaiah Spiller, who was battling a tailbone injury late, missed part of the second half, and he still finishes with 4 catches for 43 yards. Has that big catch down the sideline late that helped set up the A&M drive inside the final 2 minutes. Was able to get his foot inbounds. Jalen Weidemeyer had a drop that I know he'll beat himself up on, but he was extremely effective tonight, especially early in the game. He helped A&M's offense get going with 3 catches for 73 yards. Had a touchdown early. Had a big run, and so this is something I think he can build off. There's plays he had a ball go off his hand in the second half. Sure, that there's no doubt, but I thought he took a step forward tonight, especially and he continues to take step forward in the run blocking department. Devon Achane, 3 catches for 45 yards. Damon Demas, 2 catches for 20 yards. Jalen Preston had 2 catches for 12 yards. And then Chase Lane, who came back this week after missing the past 2 weeks, had 1 catch for 7 yards. So spread the ball around well. Again, Zach Calzada finished his 21 of 31 for 285 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception. And again, can't say it enough. I think he deserves a lot of credit because the criticism he's gotten, and he has struggled. There's no doubt about it. He struggled. He struggled in the Colorado game. He struggled in the Arkansas game, and he struggled in the Mississippi State game. But the way he stepped up tonight, and the way he stepped up in a big moment, especially down in the fourth quarter, again, I think and it's natural to just think the way these past couple of weeks have gone for Texas A&M. When Alabama took a 38-31 lead, it was kind of a moment to think, okay, well, it was a nice story to hold on to the lead all deep into the fourth quarter, and A&M sure will probably be able to build off of this from a recruiting standpoint, just to be able to keep the game close and the crowd atmosphere and all that. But for him to step up with a big drive to lead A&M on a 6-play, 65-yard drive in 2 minutes and tie the game with a big throw. And let's be honest, he had a guy rolling into his knee on that play. Had to fight through that. Fought right back to get back on the field. Showed that toughness. Showed that grit that I think people really appreciated about Kellen Mond the past few years. Comes right back, connects on an 8-play, 54-yard drive in two and a half minutes. And A&M, frankly, had more plays in the final 4 minutes there of the game than they had the entire rest of the half, and that's unbelievable to think. That's just unbelievable to think that the way the offense came alive late, and we're able to make those plays when it matters down the stretch. He deserves a lot of credit, and there's plays. Sure, he'll continue to learn from those plays. But there's no doubt that the scrutiny that he had on him the past couple of weeks, and the way he responded, is the stuff that I think a lot of A&M fans going forward will really remember. This is a game that a lot of A&M fans are going to remember for a lot of reasons going forward, and this might be one down the line that they talk about for years. And in the way that I've heard other games mentioned, going back to the UCLA game and some of the others you saw one of the picks mentioned, going back to the last time they upset Alabama, and just some of those plays that I think there's going to be plays from this game that are going to stick with A&M fans for a long time, and it's one of them is probably going to be that touchdown pass late from Zach Calzada to Anias Smith on a play that he's missed the past couple of weeks, but made a huge throw at a huge time, and just deserves a lot of credit, as does this defense, as does this offensive line, which was another target of some of the scrutiny and some of the criticism that they'd taken, and they hadn't played well. And I think they owned it and didn't shy away from it over the course of the week. But This is certainly something that A&M can move forward. And so looking ahead now, what this win means going forward for A&M, well, it changes the like kind of the way you look at this season. Um, and it just changes the way they're looking. As for players hurt, we'll be able to get an update on that. Probably Monday. Jimbo Fisher will usually be able to give that. Obviously, Zach Calzada was able to come back into the game after getting checked out with his knee, um, and Isaiah Spiller was able to come back into the game as well with the tailbone. He's a guy that we know can fight through a lot. Didn't get an update on Jameer Johnson um, as to why Kenyon Green was in the left tackle. That'll probably be something Monday that Jimbo Fisher will be able to give an update on. Just in terms of and some of the other guys too. I know Tyree Johnson was certainly battling through a lot tonight too, and went down a couple times as well. Jaden Peavy also went down, so that'll be something probably Monday that they'll be able to talk with the medical staff and get tests done and things like that and get a better sense. But I think the concern level probably for guys like Tyree Johnson and Isaiah Spiller and Zach Calzada are low, just given that they were able to re-enter the game, and we'll see kind of where the health status is on Monday when Jimbo Fisher can get a kind of a better grasp of it after talking to the medical staff. But to look at what this just means going forward for A&M now, it, again, as I was mentioning before, kind of changes the complexion of the season, truthfully, because coming off of losses to Arkansas and Mississippi State, the general thought coming into this game with A&M 16-point underdogs was they'd lose this game, be 3-3, and then be looking at big games against Missouri and South Carolina with the bye week approaching after that. And this now totally changes that. A&M now sits at 4-2 with winnable games, I would say, against Missouri and South Carolina to potentially get to 6-2, and then they'll have another big game at home against Auburn, and I think that'll be a huge game for A&M just in terms of being able to continue this momentum. The South Carolina and Auburn games at home are big ones for me, and then they have two big ones on the road. I know right now LSU is struggling, but that's a program that's going to get up for a game like LSU, or a game like A&M, just given the recruiting implications that are on the line. They gave A&M a pretty good fight last year. I know they got blown out again tonight by Kentucky, and that's a program that's really in trouble right now with under Ed Orgeron. But just I think that's a game that A&M now theoretically should win, even though it's in Baton Rouge. But LSU will be up for that game as well, and so A&M certainly got a chance to build off this and take this momentum and run with it. Offensively, I think they have a lot to build on, especially starting with the offensive line. There's Zach Calzada's confidence should be sky high after this game, heading into next week. And now the key for Texas A&M is, and Jimbo Fisher's talked about this before as well, it's not just how you handle defeats, but it's how you handle success. And so for A&M, they've got to be able to handle success and go out and beat a team like Missouri that was looked at as a trap game before, just given how much emphasis A&M put into this game, and just the magnitude of this game for the A&M program. It's just they've got to be able to refocus, turn the page, and be able to get on to Missouri after. But enjoy this one, because this has been a couple rough weeks for the A&M program. I think there's no doubt about it, coming off the loss to Mississippi State. Tons of criticism from all directions. And it really wasn't looking good heading into the Alabama game, and they showed a lot of fight and a lot about where this team is to be able to come back and beat a team like Alabama, and totally just changes the complexion of the season, and gives them a lot of confidence going forward for a team that really needed confidence. I think after losing Haynes King against Colorado, I think that was a blow for this team to deal with for a couple weeks, and having to deal with a new quarterback and build a chemistry with him. I think there was certainly a lot to overcome, but this gives A&M a lot to move forward on both sides of the ball. I think, again, I know he had a critical penalty, but Tyreek Chappelle and what he was able to do going up against that group of Alabama receivers. This game has to give him a lot of confidence going forward. And Jalen Jones, I know, had his moments that were tough as well, but he also has to take quite a bit of confidence. This defense as a whole, just the way they performed. I know they've given up 38 points to Alabama, but this is an offense that had come in rolling, and for A&M to come out with 4 sacks again. Tyree Johnson had a huge night. It's just a huge confidence boost moving forward. And I thought Mike Elko had a great game plan. You couldn't allow Bryce Young to sit back and try to pick this defense apart. I think you had to bring pressure. You had to come after him, and that's exactly what A&M did. And you were able to move him off his spots and force him into a couple mistakes, which you were going to need to do to win this game. And A&M did exactly what they needed to do. And you were going to get burned by a couple big plays. That's fine. A&M didn't allow anything to get over the top of them. I thought that was another thing that was notable is they forced Alabama to string together long drives, and that showed down in the red zone when forcing them into the 2 field goals down in the second half was huge. And that's a result of not giving up those plays over the top, forcing them to execute down in the red zone with a young quarterback in a loud stadium. I was surprised that Alabama didn't run the ball down in the red zone. That is something I was pretty surprised about. But just given the night that Brian Robinson had, 24 carries for 147 yards, he was a monster for Alabama. And to not get any carries down inside the 5-yard line, I think it was on the second to last. It was before the touchdown on the field goal to cut it to 31-30. For him to not get any carries inside the 5-yard line was very surprising to me. But again, he finishes with 24 carries for 147 yards. Jamison Williams finishes with 10 receptions for 146 yards. He was also a huge problem for A&M in the secondary. But ultimately, A&M was able to do just enough. And we'll see where this A&M team goes going forward, coming off this win, and how similar this ends up being to the Florida game, with their backs against the wall, and just what A&M was able to do with that win and the confidence they took from it moving forward, and the pressure that it eased. Because I think, again, there was a lot of pressure on this A&M program, and some of that was just due to other factors. Recruiting. It was just general, the high expectations that A&M had coming into the year. And let's be honest, a lot of those expectations look towards this Alabama game. Since early June, this Alabama game has been talked about ad nauseum about could A&M get over the hump, and they were able to do it. And so now this game's in the rearview mirror for A&M, and it gives them plenty to work with moving forward. Jimbo Fisher becomes the first assistant to beat Nick Saban. That's another huge storyline from this game. And so just an incredible job by the A&M staff to respond in a moment that was not looking good. Again, A&M entered the game 16-point underdogs and comes up with a huge upset over number 1 Alabama. So enjoy this one tonight, A&M fans. I know it's been a rough couple of weeks. They've put some disappointing showings together against Arkansas and Mississippi State, but this one will certainly outweigh that going forward. I am sure of that, just because of what this team had to go through and what they've shown. This is one that, again, like I said earlier, I think A&M fans are gonna remember for a while. So with that, thanks as always for jumping on. I know it's close to midnight here in the Central Time Zone, and so again, A&M fans, enjoy this one tonight, and we'll see you soon. We'll be back here next week after Missouri, and every week moving forward. So with that, have a good night.